So last week, I stood up here and we talked about the fact that we are not broken. And I did receive a number of emails and phone calls from those of you who were here and some who saw it online, and I received one this morning from someone who just watched last week's. And obviously it's a pretty touching idea, I am not broken. Apparently it presses some buttons on some people. I know for myself even. So this week, as I went through my week, I just kind of played around with that concept of how much brokenness do I see in the world? How many people appear in front of me letting me know that they are broken just in the way they're speaking to me or just in the way they interact with me? And then somewhere throughout the middle of the week, I was reading a book that I'm reading, and I understood what it was I wanted to talk about this week. So the title of my talk this week is Get Real. Get real. Now, I've been the type of person that my entire life, people do tend to say to me, get real. Anybody else here? Yeah, where the world just tends to look at you and say, come on, get real. Now, most of it's because some people may think I have kind of a Pollyanna view of life. That I see the cup not only half full, but I see a very big cup. And I see a lot of things in it. And they're all good. No matter what's floating in there. It's all good. And people tend to say, get real. I do believe that God is all there is, so good is all there is, and that I am God. And to that, people sometimes say, get real. You're God? Really? I mean, you really want to take that on the way you are? Who you are? I could point out to a few things that are not so godly. So get real shows up a lot in my life and has shown up a lot in my life. Even this week, I said something about, at the picnic, someone said to me, they wanted me to do a dunk at the picnic. Would I be willing to put on a Speedo and sit on a bench and people would throw balls to dunk me? And I said yes. And then someone close to me said, get real. You're going to put on a Speedo and let people throw balls at you? I said, for a price. I said, let's look at it this way. A lot of people who don't usually come to the picnic will come just to do that. So get real is usually said to people when they appear to not be real. In Mark Nepo's book, thank you, Michelle, The Exquisite Risk, he writes this: we are always at choice to either cover ourselves with things that don't matter or to live more cleanly. We are always a choice to cover ourselves with things that don't matter. It is up to you and it is up to me to decide in our life what matters. So I'm here to ask you today the question, one of the questions today, what matters in your life? What matters to you? What do you actively say to yourself, this matters to me in my life? This matters. Now here's the thing about that. Most people will say, what matters in my life is to be happy. And then they go about doing things that don't make them happy. Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever done that? Where you say, I want to be happy. I want to be successful. I want to be rich. I want to be loved. I want to be in love. And then you go about doing everything you can to make sure none of that happens. And that's what I want us to look at today. That's where I want us to get real. What do you say matters to you most in your life, and are you doing anything to make it happen? What really, really matters to you? You know, it can become a real struggle for us to stay focused. Mark Nepo says this. It can be a struggle for us to stay focused on what we say matters in our lives. Because so often we get pulled away by things that shouldn't matter in our life. I loved what Sharon Earl said this morning, because that's really what Get Real is all about. Are you willing to? I mean, Jesse, how old is Jesse? 15? A 15-year-old boy is getting real with his life. He's not pretending to think one thing and say another. He's not pretending that everything's okay if it's not. He's even not pretending to be devastated because he made a mistake. He's getting real. And I love the way Sharon discussed this, because what it really showed was, if you're willing to get real, everything opens up for you. There's no more facade. It's real now. The second part of that quote is to live more cleanly. To live more cleanly. What does it mean to live more cleanly? To live a clean life? He says that sometimes it takes great raucous cleanse. It takes a great raucous cleanse to open the chambers of the soul. How many of you here have ever gone through a cleanse? A physical cleanse? I have. It's very cleansing. I remember going through a cleanse, and I went to this mud bath to do it. And they put me I was taking some herbs and stuff and going through this cleanse that was just starting. And they put me in one of those mud baths. It's a bathtub filled with mud. Oh, mud bath. So I'm in there, and the mud's up to here, and I can't do it. I just can't do it. That's way too much mud, and it's way too confining. And I had to jump out. And so I found other ways to cleanse. But I remember that during the physical cleanse, I just kept saying to myself, who knew all of that was in there? Not to get gross, but who knew that there is so much stuff in our bodies that we really don't need? Well, take that and move it to a mental cleanse. Who knew that there was so much stuff in our minds that we really don't need? That's what it means to be living cleanly. Instead of allowing the cleanse to proceed, though, sometimes what we do is we go running. We stop the process. Why? Because as Sharon said, the process becomes a little too difficult. The process becomes a little too scary. Cleanses very often show up in the form of a crisis or a betrayal or a problem. There's a reason why in crisis we always tend to pull out the God card. Have you ever noticed that? I remember when I was little, when something went wrong, I always dropped to my knees and said, fix this. As though something outside of myself could fix it, because that was the old religion. The old religion said, God, fix this. The new religion says, I am God. How am I going to fix this? It's not much better. In fact, sometimes it feels worse, doesn't it? Oh my God, I am God. Now what? Has anyone ever been there? He's like, okay, every week he says, I am God. That's not helping me. Not so much. Because when this shows up, I don't know what to do. So old thought, new thought, I think we need a different thought. And I think the thought we need is to get real. We need to get real. I think we run away way too often. I think we are afraid of what's going on in our lives way too often. And here's the thing. There are two worldviews, and Mark Nepo talks about this. There's two worldviews that we live by, not unlike the Wizard of Oz. When Glinda looks at Dorothy, she only has two choices, right? What are those choices? Are you a Are you a good witch or a bad witch? That's it. It's like there's no other choice. You're either a good witch or a bad witch. Now, let's get rid of good and bad, because I don't want to get into pejoratives. But are you one thing or the other? And what he says the two things is we either believe in our connectedness to all things, we either believe that we are the presence of God, or we don't. We either believe in our connectedness, our oneness with all things, or we accept that we are disconnected, and this is what he says, and isolated from one another. So there are two things going on at all times in that scenario, me and you, and I am separate. Now what happens for most of us is we go through life somewhere between those two beliefs. Sometimes I feel connected, and sometimes I don't. Don't you feel that way? Sometimes I feel like I am one with God. Sometimes I feel like God. And sometimes I feel like I am isolated, and I feel really less than God. And yet, that perspective is what drives you into living your life. Drives you into living your life either fully or limitedly. So most people flip-flop. The belief that we have really informs what we consider real. And that's what I wanted to get to today. What do you consider real in your life? I mean, think about this for a second. What's real? Is your job real? Is your marriage real? Is your health even real? Is the home you live in real? Is this building right now real? Is the seat you're sitting in real? Is all of this real? Or is it when you close your eyes and meditate, when you find that place in you that is so expanded, real? That's the reality. We tend to think, I believe that this teaching and many of the New Thought teachings can tend to say to us that it's when we go within and we get spiritual, that's real. That's the reality. And that we need to take that and try to paint that over everything in our lives. And I'm here to tell you today, in order to get real, we have to start understanding that all of it is real. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Brilliant for Sharon to say what she said. That when Jesse was feeling what he was feeling, what's the first inclination for a mother or a father or a friend or a lover? Let me fix it. Let me fix you. I can fix you. I know exactly how to fix you. Can't do myself. I can fix you, though. Right? And yet, the only thing you can ever do is really allow someone to be who they are, to process what they're processing, to feel what they're feeling. This chapter in this book has so moved me this week, and it's called The Struggle to Be Real. So he says, everyone actually faces the bigger question at some point in their life. What does it mean to be here? What does it mean to be here? Not just here today. What does it mean to be on this planet at this time in the body of the life you're in? And I don't just mean the physical body, the body of your life that you're in. What does it mean to be here? And that takes me to a bigger question. Who are you? And takes me to a question. Who am I? Who are you? Who am I? And notice I'm not saying, what are you doing with your life? That's not the issue. It's, who am I? In order for me to get real, I have to know who I am. And I think part of our problem with getting real is we don't know who we are. So things that show up as real in our lives, they're not. But we don't know that because we're not coming from a perspective of understanding who we are. And frankly, once we do get who we are, it's all real, folks. Everything that shows up. Now, when I know who I am and that I am one with everything, then my position in life, I get to stand in front of everything and be transparent and just process what I'm processing. I get to say what I'm feeling. Now, that doesn't mean that we now have a license to go around and tell everybody exactly what we think at every moment. Does anybody know those people? It's my family. Every day, we know the people that do that. That's not what this is, because frankly, that's not being transparent. That's being reactive. Transparent means that I know who I am at all times, so much so that I'm actually feeling what I'm feeling. I'm not pretending or trying to alter it. I'm actually allowing it to show up. That's what getting real is all about. So, the question is, are you real? Are you authentic? That's a word that gets thrown around a lot, doesn't it? Authentic. Are you authentic? What does it mean to be authentic? What does it mean to be real? So here's a really brilliant quote. And I'm going to invite you to really let these words sink in. To be real requires an outer commitment and an inner commitment. An outer commitment to live as close to our experience as possible, and an inner commitment to keep our individual spirit aligned with the soul of the world. And then he goes on, an outer commitment to stay transparent until what we experience is what we feel. So, perhaps you can tell my energy today is, it's not that it's a low energy, but it's reading this chapter this week has taken me to a place of insisting to myself that I experience every moment and I am aware of what I'm feeling at every moment. And I don't have to then share it with you unless I decide that it's important for me to share it with you, because if I don't, I'm going to hold on to it. And then I find a way to communicate it that is loving and necessary. So I love those two things. In order to be authentic, it means you must be willing to live in the experience. That when something's happening in your life, you are willing to experience it, not try to talk it down, not try to rationalize it, not try to fix it. We are such a generation of fix-its. And we're fixing so much that we're not actually getting anything out of it. It's like fast food for the mind. We're fixing it right away. Let's fix that right away. Let's alter that. No. I love this concept. Because I grew up in a family where you never let the world see what was happening in our family. We are the Mellon family. We are attractive, we are successful, and we are happy, God damn it. And I don't mean to be making fun of my family, because most of them have already realized this. And if they haven't, well, they'll listen to this talk and I'll hear about it. It's really important to know who you are, where you are, what part of this journey are you at, and then either buy into this or not. You can leave here today having bought into this or not. You can leave here today and say, oh my God, I need to get more real with my life. I need to actually experience my life that's actually happening instead of constantly trying to change it to a better life. As if God would create a life for me that wasn't the better life. Jesse knew what he was feeling. And yes, he made a mistake. Has anyone in this room ever made a mistake? Okay, it feels like the end of the world, especially a mistake like that. For a 15-year-old boy, the first time you make a mistake and you lose a friend, devastating. But he processed it, and I love it. From that mistake, which of course was not a mistake because it was the inevitable consequence of a life that needs to continue to evolve, from that mistake came such wisdom and so much. So, your option today in listening to this is to decide, am I willing to be uncomfortable enough to experience my life hook, line, and sinker? And to be so aware of it, to be so present in that moment, that I then actually, and this is what I love what he says here, an outer commitment to stay transparent until what we experience is what we feel. So often we move through the experience and I don't even know what I felt. And people say, well, how was it? I don't know. I got through it. I'm at the other side of it. It's done. End. And that's not it, folk. That ain't it, kid. That ain't it. Mark Wyrick. That was approximately 20 minutes. Right? So, I don't want that anymore, do you? I want to feel what I need to feel. I want to feel what God knows I need to feel. I need to do what God knows I need to do. And if it's make a humongous mistake, I'll understand there's no such thing. And that, oh, I see, I'm processing it this way. Okay. An inner commitment. So the outer commitment to stay transparent until what we experience is what we feel. Do you understand that? Can I go on? I'm checking in. Do you get the understanding to experience something until you actually feel it? Everybody got that? I'll keep talking. And then the inner commitment to stay transparent until who we are is joined to the source of life the way a drop of rainwater joins the ocean. Being real involves an acceptance of being cleansed of everything false. Being real involves being cleansed of everything false, staying so present, being willing to experience until we feel what we need to feel, and at all times being connected to the understanding that I am one with everything. And there is nothing for me to turn my eyes from until I understand what it is. It is not okay for me anymore to turn away from something because it scares me. It is not okay for me to turn away from something because it looks negative. It's not okay for me to turn away from something because I think it's wrong. I need to feel what I feel, trust that as God, and the oneness of God being present in me, trusting and knowing that that's who I am, then this has what it needs. It is exactly what I need to know and feel and think in this moment. And now I can move to the next moment, and the next moment, and the one after that. So, inner conviction and commitment, outer commitment and conviction. So, how can we stay in integrity with this process? How can we make a practice, and here's a quote from the book, how can we make a practice of wearing down what thickens around our mind and heart? Just listen to those words. How can we make a practice of wearing down what thickens our mind and heart? Let me tell you, there is a lot that thickens our minds and our hearts. We have created such brilliant walls, such brilliant armor. We have allowed ourselves to become so thick with our protective covering that I don't know how it's possible to feel what's going on. So how do we make a spiritual practice out of wearing down what thickens around our mind and heart? And he says, in actuality, living as close to our experience as possible is what it will mean to be authentic. Living as close to our experience as possible. That means we cannot be a people of running away, or even turning away. We must become a people that so knows who they are that I can see anything, I can experience anything, I can hear anything. At the end of the chapter, he asks, are you thickening your walls, or are you making yourself transparent? Are you thickening your walls, or are you making yourself transparent? So let me go back to my first question to you. What matters to you in your life? What matters? What really matters? What most matters to you? We are in a science that says whatever you tell yourself matters, you have the ability to create. If it's happiness, you have the ability to create that. If it's prosperity, you have the ability to create that. If it's health, you have the ability to create that. This week I got a phone call from someone whose son, 18-year-old son, is in the hospital, going through exactly what I went through 2 years ago. And he's 18 years old. And someone had told her to call me and ask me if I could help. And I said, well, I can know the truth for him. And I said, and I'm actually available anytime he wants to call and ask me and talk to me. And she said, well, what has happened to you? And I said, you know what? I'm great. I feel great. I look great. I said, everything's great. I said, my life is great. And she said, but what was it like when you were in it? Was it just devastating? I said, you know what? No, it wasn't. Was it difficult? Sure. I think it was more difficult for the people around me than for me. It's certainly more difficult for my husband than for me, my children, my friends. But what I said to her was, I said, here's the thing. In every situation, there is something sacred. In every situation, there is something sacred. And she said, well, my problem is I'm so afraid I can't look at him. Every time I look at him, I see it. He is 18 years old. He's now down to like 120 pounds. And I said, what did he start at? And she said, 140. I said, I'll beat you. I said, I started at 165 and went to 130. She said, wow. I said, I know. She said, what do you weigh now? I said, more. I said, no, I'm back up to 165, but it's different weight. It's certainly moved in different directions. I got to put it on the way I wanted to put it on. And so we had this great conversation, but what she reminded me is that we are so quick to turn away from that which scares us. And I think it's time for us as a congregation, as a spiritual congregation, as a New Thought community, to start being fearless in what's going on in our lives. To be able to look at our lives no matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a failing marriage, if it's disease, if it's financial problems, if it's I don't know what to do with my life, if it's writer's block, it doesn't matter what it is. Feel it. Experience it. Don't run away from it. It's there to teach us something, to say something to us. And frankly, we put it there for that reason. So, what matters? If you want to get real in your life, then you have to decide. Are you connected or are you isolated? And I think the time has come when we have to stop being somewhere in the middle. Or more here today and less here tomorrow. The truth is, we are connected. We teach that. We know that. And you know what happens when we're connected? When we're connected, we get to live life to the fullest. It was so funny. We got a postcard this week in the mail sent to one of the people in our building from Scientology. And it literally looked exactly like our postcard. Not only that, it said on the cover, Scientology, living life to the fullest. And I was like, we had that 8 years ago. They must have stolen that from us. And I said, but you know what? Good for them. Steal it. Because it's time for all of us to start living life to the fullest. And I honestly believe that the only way you and I are going to really, really live life to the fullest is if we get real. So I'm going to ask you to do something. I'd like you to take a deep breath, and then I'd like you to just hold your breath until it's uncomfortable and let it out. Okay? So here we go. And we breathe in and hold it. I'm going to assume most of you have, I haven't seen anybody fall over yet, so I'm assuming most of you have let your breath out. I believe that very often we've been living our lives by holding our breath. When we are unwilling to be real, we're holding our breath. But I want you to notice that you can't do it forever. At some point, you are going to have to let the breath of life, God, exhale through you, because you're going to need to breathe. I think it's time for us to start breathing again. Stop holding our breath. Get real. Experience life. Live it to the fullest. And really understand we are one. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you.